Welcome, everyone, to the first episode of the Avian Avarice podcast. We are Avian Avarice. I'm Captain Dan.
Rob Sure.
Justin Murator.
And I'm Andrew Martin.
And we are a competitive birdwatching team. You might have seen us on the July 2022 episode of HBO's Real Sports. And it is our experience on that show and just our love of birding that kind of made us want to make a little series of videos, some podcast videos about some topics in birding. And so here we are. And today, the topic that we're going to try to cover is how do we become birders? How did the four of us go from being normal people to trying to chase birds around outside? And all four of us are going to kind of give you our answer about that. And I'm going to start with sort of my story. I have been a birder since I was a little kid, and I actually don't remember how I started. I can remember going to elementary school when I was, in first or second grade and picking out birds out the window and identifying them. That's like my earliest memory of birding. And it's kind of funny because I didn't have anybody in my family who was a birder. I didn't have a parent or sibling who was a birder. Something about birds just interested me and I liked them, and I started, noticing them and watching them. I did have a great uncle who was kind of a general outdoorsman, and he encouraged me a lot to, do things like gardening and be in the outdoors. And probably he kind of rubbed off on me a little bit. And somehow over time, I just started doing it. And Dad gave me a pair of binoculars so I could go out and look for stuff. When we were on vacation, he would drive me to places where there was parks and things so I could start looking for things. And over time, I just became more and more serious about it. My parents bought me the Peterson Field Guide to Birds, Eastern Birds of the United States. And basically, I just sat there and memorized the book, just looked through it. And I would go to the public library and check out the National Geographic Guide to North America. And I would look through that and see the Western birds that weren't in my other book, and just got really excited about it. And little by little, knew more, cared more about it. Other people knew that I was into birding. And I guess it was really in high school then when I could drive a little bit that I started to become more independent with it. But yeah, I've been a birder basically for as long as I can remember. And, it's a weird question. I always get asked, how did you become a birder? And I almost can't really answer it because it was so long ago. It's like lost to history, but it's been with me my whole life, and I've always had a lot of fun with it. And then when I got older, eventually I met some other people who were birders. I was well into my teenage years and even my 20s when I met other people who were birders. And I think one of the first was actually Rob. So Rob, you want to tell us your story?
Sure. So I got into birding formally when I was college age. So growing up, I grew up in a northern part of New Jersey, pretty wooded. It's either the city of Newark or city of Pequannock watershed area. So very high rate of bears in that area. So growing up, we just played around in the woods the whole time. So you would stay attuned to the sounds of nature because they kind of alerted you to everything else going on. One of the things you would hear is birds. So I had an outdoorsy kind of aspect to me. I always grew up, hiking, fishing, camping, that type of thing. So when I got into college, I got into, went to Montclair State University, and there was an ecology course there. And it was Dr. Smallwood was the professor that taught that course. And for the term project for ecology, you basically had three options. You could look for mollusk shells, insects, plants or plant material, basically try and identify trees, or you could look for birds. And the reason I know that is because I still have that. I don't know if it's going to come in or not, but that's the Bio 213 Section 1, Spring 2005 assignment from that course. So everyone else was having a tough time because even though it was labeled bio in the spring, I think I actually took it in the fall. So fall is happening, and I don't know if you've been to the Jersey Shore, but a lot of the mollusk shells are smashed to bits. There's no way you're going to identify that well. All the trees are basically down to bark. And again, you're not going to have a lot of ease identifying that. And then I chose birds. And in a single afternoon with a point and click camera, I proceeded to get 15 bird species like right off the bat. So we got some mute swans, we got some Canada geese, we got some mallards, we got let's see what we got. Red-tailed hawk. That's all I could see was the red tail. There's mourning doves in there, I promise. And there's got to be probably at least one. Oh, so that was cheating. We did some bird banding, so I got a couple of that way. And then I want to say there's at least one in there where it's just a single red dot amongst a sea of white, which was the cardinal, which I think is how I finished it off. So the next semester, or very closely after the next semester, there was a master's level course that you could do, which was ornithology. And that's really when I got like into it. At that point, as Dan mentioned, I think we all kind of had a Pearson guide at some point. Those were all my tabs to figure out where my taxa were and figure out where I was when I was trying to figure things out. I had my first book that I like tried to keep all of my, IDs on and whatnot. And when we did this ornithology class, instead of doing 2 hours of lecture and then just a 3-hour lab, Dr. Smallwood would personally call every student that signed up for that course, say, hey, we don't actually do it this way. Our lab is every other week, and it's a 6-hour chunk on a Saturday, and we go somewhere. So that was when I started to realize that there was more to Jersey than just the northern part of Jersey. So we did Great Swamp, we did Cape May, we did Highlands, and then eventually the culmination is in the fall. We headed out to PA to Hawk Mountain, and that's when you're seeing thousands of birds coming at you over a ridgeline. So that's like what really kind of got me hooked into going to like destination birding, and then also realizing that there was more to Jersey than just my little section. And that's kind of how I got into birding in the start. But I'll toss it over to Justin.
Hey, so my story is, I always had like an innate curiosity with nature growing up. I was always interested in all these types of things. However, I never really, it took me a long time to realize that bird watching was actually a thing. So Captain Dan and I had a mutual friend that just took me down to a swamp in Wayne in New Jersey, North Jersey. And the swamp was low, and I was like blown away by the amount of species we saw. I think it was 66 species. And it was like walk 10 feet and oh my God, there's something new. Walk 10 feet, there's something new. And I couldn't fathom that there were that many species of birds. And I was 30 years old. So I got a very late start on the entire process. And I went and got, I went with a Sibley book. I did exactly what Rob said. I just memorized everything I could memorize out of that book. And it was an addiction immediately. It was just, I want to see as many things as I could possibly see. And now I'm almost 43. So we're looking at almost 13 years of doing this. And it still fascinates me, the variation of colors and shapes and sizes and habitats. And it is something else. And I feel that people don't know what they're missing when it comes to becoming a bird watcher, such as we are. Everything about it is awesome. The whole aspect of the challenge of the elements, like today, Dan and I went out and we just sweat bullets, and who cares? You just doesn't matter. You put everything aside and you go look for what you're looking for, and you hope that maybe you're going to see something you haven't seen in a long time. And it's just awesome, and it's fun, and it's like a collection without the physical clutter, but yeah, that's how I got into it. And it really stinks because I've been to all 50 states before I became a bird watcher, and it is painful to see the places I've been walking past all these birds and dismissing them when I was 19 and 20 and just being like, wow, what was I actually seeing when I was walking by? If I had only known earlier what I was actually walking by, what would I know now that I don't know? But you know what? We are where we are, and that's the best part about it. You can't stop learning. You can't possibly know everything. No matter how good you think you are, there's always more to learn. And I think that's the best part of it. Andrew, your turn, my friend.
Yeah, so actually, pretty fittingly, because Dan's going to factor into this story, my story pretty closely mirrors Dan's. I don't know exactly how old I was, but one of my earliest memories is at my aunt and uncle's wedding in Colorado. And I remember my grandpa picking me up to look through a scope at a bunch of broad-tailed hummingbirds at a feeder. So for whatever reason, that just really stuck with me because the birding bug hadn't really bitten just yet. Probably too young to have like any interests or hobbies at that point. But one of my, like a little bit later on, I'll never forget, we were down at my grandparents' house in Long Beach Island. They used to live in Barnegat Light, and Barnegat Lighthouse State Park is one of the more famous places for birding in New Jersey. But we were actually there in the summer, and I will never forget, we were walking around, and he shows me an eastern kingbird teed up on like a dead snag, and it's just sitting there. It was one of the first birds, like, I was a little kid. I didn't know what I was doing with binoculars, but it was one of the first birds I really got to see well through binoculars, and I was just like, huh. That's pretty cool. And then my grandpa knew he had me hooked. So then he gave me a field guide. It was the National Geographic 3rd edition. And then it was all over from there. I was looking through that book, just going through everything, like absorbing as much as I could. And also I'm noticing the common theme of field guides between all of us. Like as soon as we all saw what else was out there, it was just kind of that, whoa, like, let's go find it. So it was probably like maybe 2-ish years later, or I don't remember if it was later that year or not, but sometime later, I think I was around 7. My grandparents used to go to the Florida Keys for the winter. So I remember going out to Key Largo to visit them. And one morning, my grandpa asked me, he's like, hey, you want to go get the newspaper with me? I was like, yeah, sure. So I was just walking along with them, and I noticed a bird up on the wire, and my grandpa did too. So he points at it and he goes, Andrew, what's that? And I looked at the bird, and then looked at him dead in the eyes and said, Grandpa, that's a great crested flycatcher. And he just started bursting out laughing because he had no idea that I was going to know what that was. But, it was just one of those things where it just really stuck, and that stuck with him. He talks about it every now and then. But yeah, I went birding with him quite a bit for a little while. He would take me around because, I couldn't take myself. My mom would take me out too. But let's cut to about when I was 13 years old, just fresh out of middle school, all ready to go into high school. I found out about the New Jersey, actually, I found out about the New Jersey Young Birders Club. However, I also was going into high school at Indian Hills High School, and as it happened, there was a science teacher there by the name of one Daniel Polillo. And he had a birding club there, and I remember seeing like the flyer up on the high school house for the birding club. I was like, that can't be real. There's no way. And actually, that first meeting they had, I kind of like poked my head into the room like to try to look around, and I saw a bunch of kids, and I was like, that's way too many kids for the birding club. There's no way. So I kind of walked away. And then I think it was later after the meeting had finished, I kind of went by and I kind of poked my head in, and I was like, is this where the birding club just was? And Dan was like, yeah. So then we started talking. But, as I was a kid, even in 8th grade, you're when you're a kid, it's kind of easy to see what you want to see. And, Dan was the one that kind of mentored me and set me straight and was like, here's how you bird, here's how you go look for stuff and all that. And he kind of, like I said, he set me straight. But the one thing that he mentioned that I will never forget as long as I live was one of the main rules of birding. And that was Dan's birdginity rule, because your reputation in birding is like your virginity. Once you lose it, you can't get it back. And that stuck with me for a like it still sticks with me. You think about it. You got to make sure what you're reporting is accurate, And at the end of the day, birding is like, it's something you do for yourself. You don't want to be cheating yourself out of sightings and stuff like that, because, you can send people on wild goose chases, but like, for whose benefit? Like, what are you really getting out of that? So, there's a lot of science involved, but it's also a personal game. Like I love going out, seeing as many things as I can see, and that's what all brought us to the World Series of birding. And yeah, so that's how I ended up on Avian Avarice here, is because of Dan kind of being I'd say my primary birding mentor.
So, I mean, I think one of the things that's worth saying is you got to know your audience, right? So if you're trying to get a bunch of teenage guys to like buy into birding, you gotta know who you're talking to, so that's where that whole idea came from. But I guess it worked, right? So here we
Listen,
are.
it's fantastic. It's perfect.
Yeah, and we'll talk about our team in another episode, but that was what, like 7-8 years ago? How long ago was that?
Yeah, that was fall of 2013. So we're coming up on 9 years.
Yeah. Wow. I think we all kind of appreciate each other's stories, and I think we kind of run the gamut of early starters to late bloomers, and I think everybody who gets into birding has kind of a different story. Probably a lot of people picked it up from a friend, somebody that they knew who was a birder, and like they end up kind of like getting that guilty by association going on, and then end up starting to bird themselves. But one of the things we hope with doing this podcast is that people who are kind of new to the hobby, or maybe just curious about it, can find out more and kind of get some access to what it means to be a birder and to do birding and to get involved. I mean, we all started somewhere, and taking a lot of different paths to get to where we are now. But it's a cool hobby. It's a fun sport. It's a great thing to do, and I think it also has a lot of there's like a lot of rewards to it as well that I'm sure we'll talk about at some point. The thing is, though, I think we can all agree probably the best thing to do if you're still watching this is probably to try to go look for some birds. So we want to encourage you, whenever you watch us, don't spend too long on the internet. Get out of here, put your feet on the ground, go outside, get your binoculars, and maybe go look for some birds. Sound good?